it's great to be here. Are you guys ready? Huh? Okay, I want you to listen to me. Listen to me real quickly right now. Over the next few moments, things can be said and things will be said that the Spirit of God will strike the anvil of your heart. If you're not leaning in and receptive to that, then it won't happen. You see, receptivity is one of the greatest things you can have, being receptive. And that means leaning in. That means saying, God, I need something to burn on the inside of me. At that moment, something can shift on the inside of your life. I believe that just one word from God can change the direction and the outcome of an individual's life. You don't need a lot. Sometimes it's something said. Sometimes it's not even said. It's something that God will use and strike something else within your heart. So over the next few moments, make a decision right now that I'm not going to walk out of here the same way that I came in. I want to talk about something that I believe is pertinent and very needed where not only America is concerned, but just really across the world. And that is stop dying and start living. We have a huge amount of our population, regardless of what we have faced in the last few months or not, that actually are dying while they're living. Only a few people really rise up and begin to live with everything they've got. And when you meet those individuals, they are filled with vitality. They're filled with hope. They're filled with future. They're filled with energy. The Bible is a book of energy. The Bible is a book of life. When you open it up, it was called the book of life. When you open it up, you immediately see that God breathed into Adam the breath of life. Jesus called himself the way, the truth, and the life. He came that we might have life, and have it in abundance. The Apostle Paul said to walk in the newness of life. I was raised in Northern California. As a kid, to earn money in the summer, we would take our lawnmower, and I'd go out and cut somebody's grass. Back then, it was your lawnmower, your fuel, and they gave you $2. Not very profitable in today's economy, but back then it was worth it. So I was in somebody's backyard, and I was mowing their grass. They had an orange tree, Pastor Robert. Sickest looking oranges I've ever seen. Little puny things on that thing. I said, what a worthless tree. And then I looked at the bottom of that orange tree, and I noticed that there was what they call a sucker. Now, fruit trees grow suckers. And a sucker is well named. It takes the energy out of the tree, but it's incapable of producing fruit. So I went home, and I grabbed me an axe. No permission. Easier to get forgiveness than permission anyhow. And I crawled up underneath that orange tree, and I cut that sucker out. I killed it. Threw it over the back fence. The next year, the oranges were that big. Because I got rid of what was sucking the life out of that tree. There's things that take the life out of us, and you got to be violent. You got to take an axe. You got to take God's. You got to cut those things out. Stop dying. Start living. Stop dying. Start living. And in order to stop dying and start living, the first thing you got to have is the correct perception. See, most problems are not circumstantial. They're perceptual. Very few things in life are circumstantial. Very few things. Now, people use the word all the time. Well, under the circumstances. Well, why am I under anything? Under it. In other words, I can't do anything about it. There's a circumstance that's prevailing that I can't do anything about. Well, you're half correct and you're half wrong. There are circumstances, that's true, but you can do something about it. Perception is greater than circumstance. Perception is greater than reality, because perception will change reality. A young man, well, not a young man, but an immigrant family that came from Europe to New York during the Great Depression, 1929. 25% unemployment, 900 bank closures across the United States. He was an immigrant, uneducated. He used to have a little kiosk. He'd wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, make sandwiches and drinks, wheel his kiosk out in Manhattan, sell sandwiches and drinks. This is during the Great Depression. The Great Depression lasted 12 years. He sold so many sandwiches and so many drinks that he paid in cash for both of his sons to go to university. Now, what I didn't tell you is that this man was a little blind and a little deaf. And being a little blind, he couldn't read the headlines of the newspaper. So he didn't know there was a Great Depression. Being a little deaf, he couldn't overhear the conversation of negativity that was going out around him all the time. His perception was, I'm in the greatest country. If you can't make it here, you can't make it anywhere. That was his perception. His perception was not negativity. His perception was an optimistic, positive perception, and he changed reality based on his perception. You see, if you'll continue to come to Powerhouse Church, God's going to make you a little blind. He's going to make you a little deaf to all the negativity, but alive to what he has to say. Are you listening? One of the greatest perception that we can have is our perception of God. If we have an incorrect perception of God, it'll affect the way we live. It'll affect how far in life we'll go. It'll affect who you marry, who you don't marry. It'll affect every facet of your life, your perception of God. If you have a negative, overbearing perception of God, that's how you'll live. If you have a victorious perception of God, then you'll live in victory. And that always has to be dealt with and changed where our life's concerned. You can look at nations that don't worship the God of the Bible and watch the outcome of those nations. History will tell you that one's perception of God determines one's outlook and one's lifestyle and one's future. You can look at nation after nation after nation after nation where they have an incorrect perception based on their religion and look at the outcome of that nation. You can look at families. You can look at countries that have a correct perception of God and look at the outcome of that country. It's based on perception. Our perception of God is absolutely essential. In John's Gospel, I'm going to read a story that most of you might be familiar with, but in the 11th chapter of John's Gospel, there is a perception that was held by, well, first of all, let me say the 11th chapter is about Lazarus. Most of the people know the story. Lazarus was dead. He had two sisters, Martha and Mary. And Jesus finds out, instead of going, he stays where he's at. So now a total of 4 days has gone by. He's in a tomb, Lazarus in the tomb, and Jesus shows up with his disciples. And when he does, you see this evident perception that is with us to this day. And it's more prevalent right now over the last few months than it's ever been prevalent before. Because Lazarus' two sisters had a wrong perception of God. And it's so evident. Jesus shows up and Martha walks up to him. This is found in the 11th chapter. In verse 21. Are you with me? Are you with me so far? This is incredible. I get excited just thinking about it. Martha shows up. And she said, listen to it. She says, Lord, if you had only been here. Oh, God. I mean, you can almost hear her tears. Lord, if you'd only been here, my brother. Tomb. He wouldn't have died. Jesus didn't say a word. What was her perception? Her perception of Jesus is the same perception that many people have today, that he is the great preventionist. If you had only been here, my brother, you could have prevented this, but you didn't. And then a few verses later, Mary chimes in. Says, you know these were sisters because she says the same cotton-picking thing. Word for word, Lord, if you'd only been here, my brother, my sweet brother, oh God, my brother, he stinks right now. My brother wouldn't have died. And then a few more verses, the crowd. The crowd. There's always a crowd. Don't listen to the crowd. The crowd chimes in verse 37. And they say, could not this man that opened the eyes of the blind have kept him from dying? What was their perception? That God is a preventionist. Let me tell you something. God's not a preventionist. He's too wise. God's not there to prevent everything from happening in a person's life. No more than a good parent is there to prevent everything from happening in a child's life. A wise parent knows that sometimes you got to get your knees skinned. A wise parent knows sometimes the kid's got to fall. A wise parent knows that if I raise my children by preventing everything, I will raise a very weak child that cannot stand against the storms of life. Because character is never built through prevention. Character is built by facing a storm, not by averting the storm. Character's not built by hiding. Character's built by standing up and facing something head on, regardless of the... Are you with me so far? God is not a preventionist. Okay, if he's not a preventionist, what is he? Jesus said what he is. He looked at both of them and the crowd and he said, I am the resurrection and the life. God is not a preventionist. He is a resurrectionist. He's the God that takes dead things and raises them to life. He's a God that shows up in the darkness. He's a God that shows up in the valley. That's why he called himself the lily of the valley. He's a God that'll walk in the midst of it. When you call on him, he'll pick you out of the miry clay, set your feet on a rock. He's the God that'll show up when nobody else shows up. He's not there to prevent something. He's there to resurrect something. We don't have to hide. The Bible clearly, at the very beginning of what we call creation story in the book of Genesis, we see this pointed out as plain as day. Creation, the first day God created, he said the evening and the morning were the first day. Second day, evening and morning, first day. Third day, evening and morning, evening and morning. We don't talk that way. If I were to ask you what a day is, you and I would say, well, the day starts when the sun comes up. At the end of the day, when the sun goes down and it gets dark, we would see a day coming to a conclusion. God did the opposite. He didn't say the morning and the evening were the first day, the morning and the evening were the second day. God didn't talk that way. He said the evening and the morning. He went the opposite order because God's days never end on a sunset. God's days always end on a sunrise because he is the resurrection and the life. He always goes, there's always a new day. There's always a new beginning. There's always a new tomorrow. There's always victory. It's spelled out clear in the book of Genesis. If you walk away from the sun, your shadow's cast in front of you, and you're going to chase a shadow all your life. You're going to chase your past. But if you'll turn and you'll walk towards the sun, your shadow's thrown behind you, and you'll never see your past again. God is a God of resurrection power. Always see him that way. The second big thought, if we're going to stop dying and start living, I love this one. I call it the practical. Everything I got there, it's all P's. We got perception, we got practical, got another P. I won't give it away. The practical. God's practical. The story opens up in an obscure way in 2 Kings chapter 7. Now, let me set the backdrop. 2 Kings chapter 7, you got Samaria was besieged by the enemy, so they were all locked up. Everybody was dying. They were eating, they were even cannibalizing their babies. And there was 4 lepers. These lepers these guys were practical. They were sitting outside the gates of Samaria. They couldn't go in. The enemy was out there. So they looked at themselves and they came to a conclusion. And the conclusion that these 4 lepers came to is the same truth that has built some of the greatest financial enterprises in the world, even though they might not have known it, that it came from the Bible. Some of the greatest feats in military history, some of the greatest athletic feats, some of the greatest businesses and enterprises were established and built on this basic principle that 4 lepers, 4 uneducated lepers came to. You want to know what it is? Do you want to know what it is? I ain't going to tell you unless you want to know. I'll tell the next service. Here it is. Here it is. They said, if we sit, we die. But they didn't stop there. Now watch this. They said, if we go inside Samaria, we're going to die. We're going to die there. We're going to die there. If we sit here, we're going to die. If we go in there, we're going to die. If we get up and we start walking towards the enemy, we're going to die. He'll kill us. They came to 3 conclusions. We die, we die, we die. That's practical. Doesn't take rocket science to figure this out. If we sit here, we're going to die. If we go in that city, they're all dying anyhow, we'll die with them. If we walk towards the enemy, they'll probably kill us, so we die. They said it 3 times. We die, we die, we die. We die. We die. We die. You getting it? You getting it? You say, how come that's so great? Oh, just hang with me. We die. 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 Die, die, die. Die, die, die. Any way you look at it, we die. They formed a conclusion that any way you toss this thing out, we die. Why is that powerful? I'm about to tell you. But first, I'll tell you another story. Back in the 1920s, there was a guy by the name of Earl P. Haney, Haney. You can look it up. Don't do it now. Lost his entire, this guy had money. He lost his entire fortune in the 1920s. Let me read you a little bit about Earl. He lost everything. He said he was so worried that ulcers began to eat the lining of his stomach. One night he had a terrible hemorrhage. He was rushed to the hospital. His weight dropped from 175 pounds to 90. This guy's in bad shape. He was warned not even to lift his hand to his mouth. 3 doctors, including an ulcer specialist, said his case was incurable. Earl lived on alkaline powders and a tablespoon of half milk, half cream every hour. And he had to have his stomach pumped twice a day. That's what I call dying. Incurable. That's not living, is it? So you know what Earl did? Earl did what them lepers did. He talked to himself. Anybody ever talk to themselves? It's all right. Anybody ever answer themselves back when they talk to themselves? I not only talk to myself, I respond in due. I talk back. You know why? Because I enjoy intelligent conversation. So Earl began to talk to himself, and he said, Earl, what do you have to lose? You're going to die. Okay. I accept it. Now, Earl, what have you always wanted? He's talking to himself. Earl, what have you always wanted to do? Well, I've always wanted to travel the world on a steamship. Back then, it took a whole year. I want to see the whole world. So Earl made arrangements on the SS Adams. He told his doctor he's going to leave the hospital. He's going to travel the world. Doctor said, Earl, you'll be dead. He said, yeah, I got my caskets already loaded on the ship. with instructions to put me in the deep freeze if I do die. And then when we come back to America, he said, take me to my family farm in Nebraska so I can have a proper burial. Earl got on that ship, the SS Enterprise. I tell you, Earl was as smart as any boy from Alabama. And he got on that boat, that ship. You see, now watch this. Earl discovered what those 4 lepers discovered. Earl discovered what some of the greatest enterprises ever been built discovered. Earl discovered what some of the greatest sports teams that ever won championships discovered. Earl discovered what people that have done great things with their life have always come to it. And here it is. Here it is. You watch it. You want it? You want it? You want it? Do you want it? Yes. This is it. When you accept the worst, you got nothing else to lose. And when you've got nothing else to lose, my God, at that moment you've got everything to gain because you'll lay it all out. You'll go like never before. You are bad to the bone at that moment. You are the devil's worst nightmare at that moment because the only way Satan could get a grip on any human being is through fear and worry. And when I accept the worst, I dislodge the fear, I dislodge the worry, and when that thing is gone out of my life, I got nothing else to lose, baby. When I got nothing else to lose, I've got everything to gain. I'm pulling out the stops. I'm kicking the door down. I'm going for broke. You can't stop me. I don't care what happens because I've already accepted the worst. Earl got on that boat, and the moment he got on that thing, he said, I started feeling better. He said, by the time we hit India, he said, I was eating every concoction they were giving to me. I was smoking long black cigars. He said, I was playing cards with the deckhands. All my weight came back. By the time I hit China, I was in perfect health. By the time the year was over with, everything had been restored in my life because Earl did what those lepers did. When you accept the worst, you got nothing else to lose. When you got nothing else to lose, at that moment you've got everything to gain because the devil can't get a foothold in you anymore. You throw doubt to the wind, you throw fear to the wind, you throw worry to the wind. There's nothing he's got on you. The Bible said when Satan came to Jesus, he could find nothing in him. Nothing in him. No foothold. He'll only keep a man or woman down if he can find something in you. But when you and I aren't hanging on to anything, that's when teams win. They go out and said, we don't have to try to hang on to last year's championship because we didn't win anyhow. So we got nothing to lose. Nothing to lose. That's when they play like they've never played. That's when a man will live like he's never. That's when a woman will come alive. That's when we think, my God, we're going for it. I'm not going to live. I'm not going to hide. I'm not going to live in fear. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to go out and live. There's an old country western song, I forget what it says, live like you were dying. That's a powerful song. You ought to get it sometime. Live like you were dying. I mean, get out there and go for it. Get out there and ride the bull. Get out there and jump off the cliff. Get out there and get a parachute on your back and jump out that airplane. Go out there to that overseas mission and go do something for God. Go out there and get involved for the Lord. Go out there and win your neighborhood to Christ. Go out there and get on a plane and go halfway across the world and walk into some village somewhere and start preaching the gospel. Feared of nothing. Scared of nothing. Are you with me so far? And then the last one I call purpose. Purpose. You see, we call ourselves a human being. Genesis refers to us as a living being. But I like to say that you and I are vision beings. Everything in us, we were constructed by God. Our anatomy, our soul, our mind, our will, our soul, our spirit, everything within us from a biological to an emotional to a spiritual context was built in us by God. And we only respond at our optimum, at our highest, when we're led and live by vision. Only at that time does everything in us come alive. You ever seen an electric fan? Electric fan? Imagine an electric fan. Hold the blade. Turn it on, plug it in. It won't hurt you. Got the little bitty motor. Just hold the blade so the blade can't spin. Turn it on, plug it in, and what's going to happen? What's going to happen? You're going to burn up the motor. Why? ¿Por qué? Because if it doesn't burn the power will burn it. If the fan can't burn the power will burn the fan. Vision requires an outward flow of the power of God. And without it, that power that is resident within me has nowhere to be generated. So it turns inward in the form of anger, frustration, criticism, whatever the case might be, and it burns me up. It works in an adverse way inside of my life. You and I were made to live outwardly, not inwardly. We were made to go forward, not backwards. We were made to go up, not down. We were made by God to live by a purpose, a vision, something bigger in our life that we wake up with, we push towards, we see it. And when that happens, that's why when Jesus said, I've come that you might have life and have it abundantly, the reason why some people don't experience more energy. Life is vitality, life is energy, life is enthusiasm, life is excitement, life is health, life is a sharp mind, a sharp body. All those things are contained in that word life. It means energy, it means vitality, it means strength, it means excitement, it means passion. And when I don't have vision, I retard. All those things draw back in my life, and that thing turns inward. You got to make a demand on life. If a car in the garage needs no fuel, and a person without a vision needs no life, because there's no demand on life. Vision makes a demand on the life of God within me, and if Jesus came that I might have life and have it more abundantly, I got to make a demand on that life, and the only way I can make a demand on that life is to have a big vision, something big. God, I don't care how young you are, I don't care how old you are, there's never should be a time in your life where you rest on your laurels, you think about what you did yesterday. There always has to come a time where you're living for something bigger tomorrow, regardless of how young, regardless of how old you are. There's never that time. You never retire from vision. You never retire from work. You never retire from a future. There always has to be something bigger in your life or you'll die. You and I are made that way. We're built that way. Wayne Myers, I'll end on this story. Wayne Myers, the icon of Mexico, saved on the USS Enterprise in World War II, fighting the Japanese when a 500-pound armor-piercing bomb bounced off the wooden flight deck of the USS Enterprise and exploded in the Pacific Ocean. Good time to get saved. That's when he got saved. God called him from Mississippi. God called him to Mexico. Couldn't speak a word of Spanish. He couldn't speak English good. He's from Mississippi. He called him to Mexico. He went down. Don't tell him that. He went down to Mexico. He's been there 75 years. He turns 98 years old in 2 weeks from now. And by the last day, August 31st, he turns 98 years old. And when he was 88 or 89, I forget what he was, he called me up one time. I've been close to him for years. He said, I can't die. That's what he said. 88, 90, whatever he was. I can't die. That's what he told me. I love it. I love that. I love that. I said, why can't you die? He said, I've got to build 300 churches in Mexico this year. I can't die. He's now built 6,000 churches all over Mexico in the last 75 years. He still lives. You know what the guy did last week? He did a Zoom call. He's 98 years old, and he's been in his house, and he can't go to a church and preach because the churches are closed in Mexico. So he said, hook me up with a Zoom call, and I'll Zoom them all. I've got to preach. He's got vision burning on the inside of his heart. At 98 years old, what's your excuse? My God, you're not made to sit. You're not made to go backwards. You're made for a vision to live life to the full and have vitality, strength, and energy pulsing through your veins. That's how God made you. Stand up with me. Stand up with me. I want to pray. Stand up with me. Stand up with me. Stand up with me. You ought to get this message and hear it every day for the next 30 days. Let this thing course itself through your veins. Let life come back in you. Let fight come back in you. Some of you laid down too long. You put up with the status quo. You've let somebody else write the narrative of your life. Let God write the narrative of your life. Don't let the media write the narrative of your life. Don't let the media tell you what you can and cannot do. Don't let the media tell you how you can and cannot live. My God, let God tell you. Let God arise, the Bible says, and his enemies will be scattered. Lift your hands towards heaven, Lord Jesus, right now. Burn. These words, brand them, burn them on the inside of our heart. Let the passion of God, the fire of God, the zeal of God, the energy of God begin to arise back in everyone here at Powerhouse Church. Let there be an intensity. Let there be a fire. Let there be a flame that turns into a bonfire on the inside of our heart. Let us live by vision. Let us live by passion. Let us live by purpose. And God, let us see things the way you see things. Our perception is we serve a resurrection God. Jesus isn't in the grave. Jesus isn't on a cross. He was raised from the dead and defeated hell, death, and the grave, and put his heel on Satan's neck and broke his authority over our life. That's the God that we serve. Lord, we thank you for that now. We bless you for that. Let this fuel people with hope. Let it fuel people with faith. Let it fuel people with a big future and a big tomorrow. In Jesus' name, amen.